Okay, let's unpack this. We're diving into a really significant moment for Singapore,
Mhm.
this recent leadership transition.
Yeah, it's a big deal. Lawrence Wong became prime minister, new cabinet sworn in May 23rd, 2025.
Right. And we're basing our whole conversation today on an excerpt from an article really digging into this new government and, what it all signals.
hmm
So our mission really is to pull out the key insights from this source. What could this change mean for Singapore's future, its place in the world?
And for the people living there, importantly.
Exactly. It feels like more than just a standard handover. The article itself seems to frame it as a moment that could set a new course.
And it's a course being set against a pretty tough backdrop, which the source describes quite vividly, this increasingly unstable global landscape.
Right.
So understanding this new team, according to the article, you absolutely have to see it through that lens. External pressures, global change.
Yeah.
It's all connected.
Absolutely. So one of the first things the article points out is PM Wong's take on the recent general election result.
That 65.57% vote share for the PAP.
Yeah. He apparently sees it not just as, well, the result, but as a clear demonstration of trust from Singaporeans.
And a desire for, what was the phrase, trustworthy leadership.
That's the one.
And what's interesting is how the source interprets that number. It's presented as more than just, votes.
Right. It's framed as a significant mandate.
A mandate for the next phase of national development, as the article puts it.
And that sends a message, doesn't it?
Definitely. A message of stability, both inside the country, kind of reassuring people, and outwards.
To investors, other countries.
Exactly. Especially in these turbulent times, the article suggests this vote is meant to project confidence.
Stability.
Okay, so moving from that mandate,
Yeah.
what about the structure? The new government itself. The article talks about how PM Wong has set up his cabinet.
Yeah, it focuses on it being anchored around four key figures, like pillars, leading critical areas.
Right. It names them Deputy Prime Minister Gan Kim-yong.
And then the coordinating ministers, K. Shanmugam, Chan Chun Sing, and Anya Kung. And it's specific about their domains, too. Economy, national security.
Public services and social policy, the big ones.
And the analysis in the source about the structure, it's quite pointed.
How so?
It calls it a consolidation of leadership strength.
Okay.
And the implication presented is that Wong is centralizing decision-making at the top.
To ensure policy coherence,
Yeah,
right? That's the stated goal mentioned.
Yes. But here's where it gets really interesting, I think.
Go on.
The article pivots right after that analysis. It doesn't explicitly state it, but it implies this question.
Which is?
Is this consolidation, the centralization, is it really a sign of strength, efficiency? Or could it maybe risk overconcentration?
So it puts that question out there, the potential trade-off. Strength versus maybe a bottleneck.
Exactly. The source makes you consider both sides. It raises that point about governance style and effectiveness, especially now.
Which makes sense. And speaking of complex times, the article is very clear that ignoring the global situation just isn't an option for Singapore's leaders.
No kidding. PM Wong himself is quoted acknowledging this stark reality, an increasingly unstable world, major powers rethinking everything.
And for a smaller nation like Singapore, the article really highlights a specific risk in all this.
Yeah.
Being marginalized, pushed to the sidelines.
Which leads to the approach the article says Wong plans to take. It calls it a careful balancing act.
A classic Singaporean approach
Why?
in many ways.
True. The source details it a bit deepening ties with major powers, specifically the U.S. and China are mentioned.
But only where interests align.
Right. And critically, standing firm on sovereignty issues where they don't align.
That balancing act again.
And he also apparently promised to build new bridges.
Oh yeah, like where?
The article mentions reaching out to countries in Africa and South America specifically.
Diversifying relationships? Makes sense.
And it gives a concrete example. Wong's meeting with Paraguay's president, Santiago Peña.
Yeah.
Apparently the first ever state visit by a Paraguayan leader to Singapore.
Huh. Interesting detail.
And the source frames it not just as one meeting, but as a symbol of Singapore's broader diplomatic ambitions.
So using a small event to illustrate a bigger strategy, that outward-looking diversification push.
Exactly. It underlines that need to diversify when the old alignments are maybe shifting.
Okay, so that's the global angle. Now, turning back home, the article also identifies economic transformation as a huge priority.
Yes, a central one for this new government. There's a clear emphasis on working closely with those tripartite partners.
Government, unions, employers, the usual suspects, working together.
to develop a new economic blueprint. The goal stated in the source is basically twofold.
Competitiveness and jobs.
You got it. Ensuring long-term competitiveness and creating good jobs. And this is all framed against, slowing global growth, so there's pressure.
And the article notes they acknowledge the challenges workers are facing.
It does. It signals stronger collaboration, particularly with the National Trades Union Congress, the NTUC.
To support workers through these transitions.
Precisely. And the source explicitly links this to those rising anxieties many people might have. Job security, cost of living.
So connecting the big economic strategy directly to people's everyday worries.
That seems to be the connection the article makes.
Okay, and the final domestic pillar the article discusses, social cohesion.
Yes. A vision for a more cohesive society, focusing on strengthening the social compact, as the source puts it.
And the article seems to see some urgency here.
Very much so. It relays a pretty stark warning, actually. Growing inequality could tear society apart.
Wow, okay. That's strong language.
It is, and it argues that this would make the nation less resilient overall.
So the emphasis, according to the source, is on, what? More social support.
Doubling down on social support, yeah.
Right.
Ensuring good access to essentials like education, healthcare, housing.
The basics.
And also creating diverse pathways for success, sort of acknowledging that the old routes aren't for everyone.
And alongside that, understanding across different groups.
Yes. Concurrently, the article stresses this absolute need for deeper understanding across ethnic, religious, and social lines.
Especially important, maybe, in a world where you see growing polarization elsewhere.
That's the context the article provides.
Okay. So we've covered the mandate, the structure, the global navigation, the economy, social cohesion, quite a bit from this one source.
Yeah. So considering all these points from the article, what does this actually mean for you, the listener, based on this picture painted by the source?
Does it feel like this new team is set up to bring the bold changes needed? Or does it seem more like more of the same, perhaps?
It's a good question to ponder, and let's just quickly revisit that other question the article kind of hangs in the air.
The centralization one.
Yeah. That leadership structure with those 4 key pillars, does that setup, as described in the source, create a stronger, more aligned government?
Or does it maybe introduce a potential vulnerability? It's worth thinking about.
So we've taken a deep dive into this article, right? Pulled out the source's view on the mandate, the structure, the global plans, the domestic priorities.
Economy, social unity.
The key themes.
And we've touched on those crucial questions the source itself raises about this new leadership.
Yeah, the tensions it highlights.
So maybe a final thought for you to consider, drawing from those tensions.
Okay.
Given that the article highlights both this clear mandate for stability and these really significant challenges on the turbulent global scene, growing domestic inequality.
Right. Stability on one hand, major pressures on the other.
How does a focus on trustworthy leadership and policy coherence, which the source emphasizes, how does that really balance the obvious need for stability?
With the potential need for, significant adaptation, maybe even bold reforms to deal with these complex, evolving pressures.
Exactly. How do you square that circle? Stability versus necessary change. It leaves you thinking about that core tension, doesn't it?